I said, I don't think he's got the flu or a cold. He don't seem to have much of a cold, but he's sick. And so he said, oh, he's got flu because that's what's going around. You had a fever. I could tell you kind of had a fever, and you didn't feel good, and you had a headache and some other symptoms, and so you didn't feel very good. And so he said, well, I'll give you a shot. So he gave you some penicillin or something and sent you back over here. And you didn't feel good at all. You got so that you couldn't keep your food down. You couldn't even keep water down. And we went over and again. And you couldn't go to school. He said, no, if you just couldn't keep your food down, maybe we better not have you. I think I saw Mason part of the time, and he'd say he was the one that always had to keep him home and be careful. I think he told me not to send you to school. And I said, I don't think he's had the flu at all. And he said, what do you think he's had? And I said, well, look at his eyes. They're yellow. The white of his eyes are yellow. And I said, he's starting to look kind of yellow on his skin to me. And the doctor looked at me and said, well, what do you think's wrong? And I said, well, I think he's either got yellow jaundice or hepatitis or something on that order. And he said, well, we can find out pretty soon. And I don't know what he did to make a test of some kind. And he come back and he said, well, he has hepatitis, but he says it isn't the kind that's catching. And so I said, should I isolate him? Should I, quarantine you? He said, no, he can't give it to anybody. But I, to this day, think that drinking out of that canteen with Grandpa while you were doing that, and it was not only a week or two before, that a few weeks before that you was drinking that water out of that canteen with him. And I think hepatitis takes quite a while to form, the way I've got it in my mind. I always felt that you caught that from him and that it affected his liver because he's already having liver problems to where he couldn't survive that operation because the doctor said he knew when he operated on Grandpa that he couldn't live, but he didn't tell the family until, he died. But he said, I knew he couldn't live because from the operation on, he just got worse, or from the time they started treating him over there, he just got worse and worse. And he said, I knew that it was fatal right on the start. But you had this, and so you came back over and you got back. You was really bad for a few days. And one day you said to me, Mama, and I said, what? And you said, I'm going to die, ain't I? I had your bed fixed in these warm rooms. And I said, I don't know, Jeffrey, I don't think so. I said, don't you feel like it? He said, I'm going to die, ain't I? I just went cold all over nearly. But it's really something to have a little child so sick and have him recognize it and ask you that when you're wondering yourself if he's going to. And I said, Jeffrey, we can ask Heavenly Father to bless you so that you won't. Do you want me to kneel right down here by your bedside and we'll pray to him? And he said, yes, he'd like that. And so we did. We knelt and prayed for him, and we prayed for him numerous times before he got better, but he finally got over that. And I don't know what type of hepatitis he had. I know they wouldn't let him go in the service when he got older and wanted to join. He was out quite a while on the start of school then, and I think he did have some work to make up, but he seemed to manage all right. Geff, I think you were too young to have Olene give you a mohawk haircut when she did the other boys. I know she did about 3 of them, maybe 4. But she gave them all a mohawk haircut while I was away. When I come back, I could have just scalped her almost like she did them. And it took quite a while for it to grow out. But it's something in the past, and I've forgiven her, I guess. Herman used to come home from the park And if your hairs was kind of shaggy, he'd run you through kind of like a man shearing sheep. And he'd cut you kind of close and nick you and everything, until when you'd go look in the mirror, you'd cry and you'd come to me to console you. And I'd always tell all of you, oh, don't feel too bad. Hair always grows back out and it won't be this way very long. And then you'd be quite consoled. After Olene and Dale got married, I think they'd gone on their honeymoon and come back, but they wanted to make a trip to Grand Canyon, and they wanted us to go with them. And so we made a nice picnic lunch, and I think Cray and you and Herman and I and Olene and Dale was in the car. And we went to Grand Canyon to see Grand Canyon. And it was before we'd ever started to work down there. And we visited a little bit at the top, and then we went out to some of the points. And we decided to have our lunch way out on one of the points. And out there was a picnic table and things. And it was such a gorgeous day, and we was enjoying it. And when we got out there, we found that there was a little deer out there that was used to coming to the picnic table every time people came there to eat, and they would feed it. And so it just came right up and almost wanted the food out of her hands. And I think it almost took the sandwich right out of your hand before you knew it, and it about scared you to pieces. But after a while you got so you dare to take little things and put it out for it to eat and back again real quick, and then you got so you was feeding it quite a bit, and we didn't dare to feed it too much because it said don't feed the deer, but we did a little bit. And then when we came back home, it was just a day or two till one night you woke up. I put you to bed, you seemed all right, and you woke up and you were delirious. You didn't seem to have any cold or anything that I could detect, but somehow you seemed almost to be out of your mind. You were screaming out, and you were grabbing at things like on the wall, and you were scared of something and everything. And I thought, I couldn't even get your attention. I'd say, Jeffrey, what's wrong? Jeffrey, try to wake you, and you just seemed like you was in a daze or something, and I couldn't get your attention. I began to get quite worried, and I thought, I wonder if he isn't comprehending. I wonder if something's caused his mind, that he just isn't rational at all. And so I said, Jeffrey, do you remember when we went to Grand Canyon and you fed that little deer? Do you remember that little deer out to Grand Canyon that came and ate out of your hand? I said, I wonder what its name was. I don't know what its name was. I wonder what it was. And I thought maybe you'd say Bambi or something like that, you know. But you didn't. You looked up and you said, Cricky Pallor. And we always talked about that little deer as being Cricky Pallor. Wherever you found those two words or coined them, we don't know. But we always remember that little deer out to the picnic table as being Cricky Pallor. When you were just walking good, maybe 2.5, Dean was up on the mountain logging, and they were coming home for the weekend. And as he came by through the trees, he heard a little bleating of a deer or something, and walked over to where it was coming from, and there was a little baby deer. And it was so frightened and alone and little and young, and he waited there quite a while, and it seemed to be abandoned completely by its mother. It seemed just so hungry. And so he knew that either some predator had killed its mother, or else somebody had poached her, tried to poach her, and found out she was a doe or something. They had killed her out of season, and it was a little orphaned. And he waited the rest of the day, and the little deer stayed right there by that fallen log. And he went back and decided he just couldn't go on over the weekend and leave that little deer there to suffer and maybe die or maybe be killed by wild predators. So he decided to bring it home and see if they could raise it on the bottle, which they did. And somehow they just did it the right way, because it just responded real good, and it got kind of fat and frisky and would play around in the yard, and they kind of fenced the holes so it couldn't get through, and they'd feed it about a certain time every morning, and you liked to go down there. Sometimes I'd walk you down there after breakfast and we had the work done up. I'd just take you for a walk, and we'd go down that far and stop into Aunt Irma's, and they were just feeding this little deer. And you went in there, but you was a little bit frightened of it. You'd kind of stay away from it, and it'd come toward you. But finally Irma said, "Here, you take the bottle, and you can feed it." And so got you to have the bottle in its hand, and it was just nursing it so good that you just stood there right with it. And Irma ran in the house, and she got her camera. She came out and took a picture of you feeding that little deer. And that was the cutest picture. It was just darling. And I don't know, after you lost all your pictures and things, I've asked her a time or two if she could find that little picture of you and Bambi, that I'd sure like to have it for you. And she said she'd look through her photos and things, but I don't think she ever found it and gave it to me. I just don't remember ever giving it to me, but I'd sure like to have it because it was such a cute little picture. You were a happy little baby, and you were a happy little child as you grew up. You seemed pleasant disposition, and you weren't a spitty-up baby. You weren't too colicky. I think you cut your teeth about normal age and walked about normal age, around a year old. And you weren't a thumb sucker. It seemed like you might have sucked it for a little while, but to carry it on out, you didn't. But the other kids sucked their thumbs for quite a long while. Most of them. Olene sucked hers for a long time, and then she quit, and then she went back to sucking it again when she was about 6 or 7. She was 10 or 12, and she sucked it for a year or two. Gail stopped sucking his when he got scarlet fever and got so sick and sore throat and everything that he couldn't stand to suck it. He quit sucking his, and Gary quit sucking his when his dad promised him that if they quit sucking their thumbs, he'd buy him one of these glass little trains, or it was different objects full of little candies, and that was during the war. And Gary was so thrilled about that he stopped sucking his right off, and when he got sucked, he went back down with his dad and got it, but he says he dropped it on the sidewalk and broke it. I don't remember that. And Cray didn't suck his thumb, but he sucked his middle finger and his ring finger. He'd double them halfway down and suck them. When he'd play out, his little hands would get brown from the sun. They'd get dirty or anything, but you could depend that on the right hand, he'd always have those 2 fingers down to the second joint. Clean as clean where he sucked them, and I can't remember, he sucked them for quite a while. But I don't remember you sucking your thumb. You loved the outdoors, and as you grew up along with the other children, you fit right in to the rock trips, the fishing trips, the fossil hunting trips, whatever was going on, and you joined right in with them. And sometimes when you'd come and be going to go to, Herman would say he'd take you on a trip for something, and I didn't have a lunch ready. He said, I'll stop and get him something at the store. And I thought maybe he'd get you something salty that you could eat, some crackers and some kind of fish or something like that for your lunch. I didn't know what he'd get. But he always ended up getting you one of those old brown cows, you used to call them, a big old long sucker that lasted you about all day to suck, and I wasn't very pleased with that. I think you enjoyed the Christmases right along with the kids, and you used to play cards with Daddy a lot. You used to shoot marbles with him, and you kids used to tug him off the couch. When he come home, he'd lay on the couch, and 2 or 3 of you'd team up, and first it was the older boys up to Ogden, and when he first came down here, and then it got so it was you and Cray and maybe Lyle. All 3 of you'd team up, and you'd just about get him off the couch, and then when you'd just about get him rolled off, why he'd give a big lunge and get back upon. And then you just work and work again to get him over to the edge and roll him off the couch. But you he never did let you. Herman was kind of a poor sport. He never let anybody ever win. And he did that with cards. when you'd play cards, you'd play rook with the cards. And he'd generally have one of the younger kids for his partner, but he would never let anybody take the widow except himself, and he always won. And they'd play and play, and especially on Christmas if we got a new deck of cards. After the older kids got a little older, they didn't always like to go with us when we went shopping to Richfield or someplace. They'd rather get with their friends and go play with them. So sometimes I'd just fix them something to eat here and tell them what they could have, and told them if it rained to shut the windows and to come home early or whatever they was going to do, and left them here. But we'd always take you and Cray with us because we thought you were too young to take. And one time, while we were going to Richfield, we kind of had an accident with a little calf when a truck was coming one way, and the little calf was standing off the side of the road, and its mother was on the other side. And the way it was, the little calf started to run, and the truck was so close that we couldn't dash out of its way. But we sped up a little bit so we could get by it a little bit, and the back wheels, the back part of the car just kind of ticked it and knocked it, I guess, just kind of senseless for a little while. And so we stopped the car and went out. It was a ways past Panguitch. We stopped the car and went out, and Herman got the calf up and got it on its feet, and it wasn't feeling too good. It was hurt a little, but it wasn't critically hurt. And we went on our way, and that scared Geff nearly to death. And you just was really frightened. And after that, you never did want to go with us. Sometimes you would have stayed here alone if we'd have let you. You did sometimes stay home with the older kids if somebody was going to stay. You'd stay rather than going with us because you were so frightened of that deer. And so one time we got you, to get you over the panic of it, you got to looking along the river as it went down. And every little while, I think it was when there was a little snag in the river and it bubbled up more or something, why you thought you could see a beaver. Well, there was more beavers down that river than you could shake a stick at. A hunter would have really made it good down there if hunting was in season. But anyhow, then down in the canyon, where the different colors slid down the walls, some of it was down the mountainside, some of it was quite dark brown and quite fine, little rocks and soil. And you said, I know now where Harvey Mangum gets his coffee to sell. And you said he comes down here and gets this and sells it for coffee. We used to go sometimes with Aunt Herman, go up on the mountain or somewhere far away that we had to go through the Bryce Canyon tunnels. And so Herman, she got so she'd honk in it to please you. And one time we were talking and she didn't honk. And you said to her, "Dang you, Aunt Irma, you forgot to honk in the tungle." She always kept reminding us about that. She thought that was cute. Another time, even you was a little bigger, and I guess a pretty good shot, but you're still quite young. You were playing out on the east of the house, and a big bee lit on the house up above the garage window, and that east window. And you picked up something and throwed it at the bee, and it crashed that window, just broke it. You didn't get a good enough aim, and it crashed that window and just broke all in a million pieces, just shattered it. Well, Daddy was going to come home for long, and I think you was afraid you was going to get into rich brown trouble. So you went and hid under your bed, and I didn't know it. The kids were standing around wondering what Daddy was going to do when he came and found the window was broken, because I don't think he appreciated as many windows as he had to replace because of BB guns and things. But he bought you the BB guns against my will. And so you went and crawled under your bed and got down where the spread covered you up pretty good. I didn't know you were under there. And I don't think I knew. I think I heard a crash of some kind, but I didn't really realize it had broken the window. And so when supper time was on, I kept wondering where you were. We kept calling you and hunting you, and I couldn't tell where you were, but Cray knew where you were. Pretty soon Cray says, I know where he is. He's hiding under his bed because he broke the basement window and he's afraid Daddy's going to punish him. And Dad felt so bad about that he went and said, come on out and have your supper. He said, I know you didn't mean to do it. And he kind of smoothed it over and you finally came out and ate your supper. One more little incident in Jeffrey's life that I guess touched my heart about as much as anything was before he went to school, maybe a year or such. But he was here playing around, and Cray was home sick that morning. He had a sore throat. But before that, I had this dear friend and the lady that I'd worked as a counselor in the Relief Society with, and she got really ill. She sort of had pneumonia, and she just had a family of boys, excepting her oldest daughter, who lived here in town also. But she had also taken this cold and was down sick. And Thelma Jolley was the lady's name that was my friend. And she'd been sick for about a week, right in bed. And I wondered what we could do for her. I'd been to see her a time or two, and I went this time and I said, Thelma, there must be something you need done. She kept saying her boys could do it, her boys could do it. And I said, how about your washing? I'll bet you've got a big washing that you need done for these boys. And she was real reluctant to let me do anything for her, but finally she said, yes, I would really appreciate it, since Ramona's down and can't help me any, if you would take my washing. She said, I hate to have you do it, but she says, since you're so willing and have offered and everything. And I said, I'll tell you what you do. You have the boys go through their closets and drawers and everything and get together after school everything tonight that they have got dirty, everything they need washed, and strip their beds, do whatever you want washed. I don't care how big it is. And then have them bring it to me as they go up to school early in the morning. And she said she would. So I was doing her washing that next morning. And among her things, when I sorted her clothes, was quite a few quite pretty little striped dishcloths. And so I piled them out to the side and was going to use a little bleach on them to get them a little better color. I didn't bleach all of her clothes because they didn't need it, but I thought, well, I'll put a little bleach in these dishcloths. And I just had a stack of them there on the kitchen floor. And Geff came in, and he didn't realize that I was doing Thelma's clothes or anything. He just saw those there and wondered, he hadn't seen them in our house before, and he said, Mama, what are those? And I said, those are Thelma Jolley's dishcloths. I said, you haven't seen any pretty ones like this before, have you? I said, Mommy don't have any like this. I just have some old kind of rags that I use. And I'm not that fancy, I guess. But Thelma's got these pretty ones. And he went away. And in a little while, I said to him, Jeffrey, I've been talking to Cray, and he thinks the only thing he would like to eat is some pineapple juice. And I said, we don't have any. Do you think if I bundled you up real good that you could go down to the store? It's just straight down the street, about 4 blocks. And I said, do you think you could go down and get him a big can of pineapple juice and then bring it back home? And he thought he could. So we put his snowsuit and everything on him, and he went down. And Hope wench was clerking there at their store, and she was the clerk. She said he came in and he said he wanted a big can of pineapple juice. And so she got it and put it in the sack. And I guess I sent the money, or maybe we was having it written down, I don't remember. But anyway, he was ready to come back, but she said he lingered around. He looked here and he looked there and he looked everywhere. And she finally said to him, "Jeffrey, is there something else you wanted?" And he wouldn't hardly answer. And she said, "If there's something else, why, you tell me and I'll get it for you. Put it in your sack." And he said, he kind of hesitated, and he went up to her and he said, "Do you have any fancy dishcloths?" And she said, "Well, I've got some dishcloths, some striped dishcloths here. Would you like to see them?" And he said, "Yes." And so she got them out and laid them on the counter, and he looked at them quite a while, and he said, "I'll take 2 of these." And so he got the 2 of them. She put them in the sack with the pineapple juice, but she put them in the bottom of the sack. And he came up the street. He brought the sack into me, and he said to me, "Mama, there's 2 things in there." And I thought, instead of having 1 big can, she had sent 2 smaller cans of pineapple juice. And I thought that's the way he had of telling me. I just looked in the top of the can and saw these 2 cans, the top of the sack, and saw these 2 cans of pineapple juice. And I thought he was telling me that there was 2 cans of pineapple juice. And I said, "Oh, that's just fine. That's just as good. I guess they didn't have a big can of pineapple juice." And he said, "No, they didn't." And so he went on the other room. And I took one out and opened it and gave Cray a drink of pineapple juice. And when I went to take the other one out of the sack, here were these 2 dishcloths in the bottom. And I said, "Jeffrey, come here." And he came there, and I said, "What are these?" And he said, "Mama, I told you there was 2 things in there." And I said, "I know, but what are they?" And he began to cry. And he said, "I bought them for you, Mama. I didn't want my nice, good Mama to just have to use old rags for her dishes." Well, I could have cried, but I had to explain to him that he mustn't just go and order things and have it put down. I thought he might get the habit of doing it, and he might order something that we couldn't pay for. But that just brought tears, and every time I think of it, I think about a little kid going and buying 2 dishcloths for his mama because he didn't want his nice, good mama to have to wash her dishes on old shaggy rags. Well, I'm about to come to the end of this tape, and there's still things I could tell, but I think I should say that of all the kids, I think maybe Jeffrey enjoyed the outdoors more than anybody. He liked all the animals and the rocks and everything about it, and he was really a joy to have down in the Grand Canyon with us when we went. He was just, let's see, I don't know, he was about 12 when we went down there, and I know he remembers all the things that I could tell down there. Some of them are funny, and some of them are kind of pathetic, but it was really good to have him down in there those years with us. And I appreciate and love him. We did things together. He helped me endure the loneliness of it down there. And thank you, Geff, for that. And now, even though he missed the baby, he did get to see our little last baby, which was born on the 15th of January, 1956. Maybe I haven't got the date right, but I think I have. He got to see the little baby. I have a little picture of it in its little casket, but Mommy never even got to see it. And I never got home for 20 days. It was a trauma, a bad time, and it's good to forget things like that, I guess, and not rehearse them. But I still have sad memories of that. And I wonder sometimes what he'd be like if we could have kept him, and how much joy he'd have brought into the life of Jeffrey, and he'd have had somebody closer his age to pal around with here in the family. But everything worked out pretty well, and I want Jeffrey to know that I love him with all my heart. I worried a lot about him. I worried in his teenager, and when he was growing up, even after he got past the teenage a little, up into his 20s, I worried about him a lot, but he turned out pretty darn good, and now it just pleases my heart. I just thank him every day in my heart for the fine young man that he is, and his family and all that he's doing. I congratulate him on his ability as a mechanic. I congratulate him on his music, on the guitar, and on his being able to compose tunes and music and help Lyle with his tape. And I congratulate him on choosing such a beautiful wife as Linda to be a companion to him, because I know that she makes him happy. And I'm pretty sure I could say it's the first time he's been happy in his married life. And I congratulate him on his children. And I just wish him the best throughout his life. I just wish that I could be here just forever to enjoy our children, because I love you all so much. I just pray always that you and your families, all of you, will stay close to the teachings of the church and follow the teachings of the prophet and enjoy life here and live good, clean, pure lives. I know we came here for a purpose, to have our mortal experiences, and I know that someday we'll be resurrected again, that our Savior gave his life to atone for our sins, and if we make mistakes, we can repent of those sincerely and be forgiven. Isn't that marvelous? And I pray that you will all remember that I have a strong testimony of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't know how we would live without it. And I pray that it will bless your families, and that they will stay close to it, that they'll be obedient to you, and that you will teach and train them in their home and stay close to them, so that we can all be a forever family someday. I haven't made a separate tape and called it Gail's, because he's been interwoven in with all of the doings of the family until we got the last two boys. And it seems like I made a special tape for them because they didn't interact with the kids that were older. And so I just think that the things that I could tell you that I haven't mentioned with the other children are things that he remembers too. But I want him to know that I'm proud of him and love him. I think he's a marvelous person. But I still pray that someday he will realize that he needs to gain a testimony of the truthfulness of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and of Jesus Christ and Joseph Smith, all these things that he's negative about, so that he can have all the blessings that he's entitled to while he's still on this earth and in the worlds to come. I love him with all my heart, and I pray for this often. And I want him to know how proud I am of him and how kind and good and sweet a person I think he is. I thank him for the many good times that we have had together, and for his generosity to all the family, and for everything he's done to make us happy, and for our communication through the years by letter and by phone, and how considerate he's been to us as parents. He couldn't have been nicer, and we appreciate that. We love him with all our hearts. I pray that he will have a long, happy life here on this earth with good health, that his health will improve, and that he can do many wonderful things yet and have success in his work, and that someday maybe he can come back to this area and live with the family here and enjoy everything together here on this earth as a family. And I ask the blessings of the Lord to be with you all constantly, day and night, and watch and guide over you, and that you will listen to the promptings of the Holy Ghost in your life when you make decisions, and that everything will turn out good for each and every one of you I love everyone and are proud of everyone.
Called him to come, and he came in the night, I think it was, and Cray was responding quite a bit better. His pulse and everything was better, and he was doing a little bit better, and so Herman pulled on went right back to Grand. And from that time on, well, Dr. Mason said to me, haven't you had this child into the doctor before this? And I said, I've had him over the second. This is the third time in about 10 days. And he told me he could go to school and that he could bring him back in 10 days, 2 days ago. And he said, he kind of profaned understood. He said, what's wrong with him? About like that. And they both worked on Cray, and the doctor, the nurse was faithful. Every few hours they came with a shot for him. And Cray got, so he just hated those shots. They were so often, and he didn't like them. They was a strong medicine of some kind that stung a little, and he just didn't like it. He kind of fussed every time the nurse came in. He'd say, do I have to take another shot? And finally the nurse said, well, you don't have to have this needle you want to. She said, wait a minute, Cray. And she said, I'll go and see if I can find another needle. So she went back and she brought out on the tray that she had the needle, this nice little needle that she was giving him the shots with regularly. Then she brought this needle that was about 7 or 8 inches long and about as big around as $1. And she said, now, Cray, you can take your choice. You can either have it with this little needle, or if you'd rather, we'll give it to you with this bigger needle. And he said, oh, I'll take the little one. And I thought, what a strategy she used, such a prophecy. And from then on, he didn't make a sound when he had his needle. He just put his arm right out and had his shot and didn't pay any attention to it. He just didn't mind that syringe at all. We laugh and say, even in the trauma, there was a little bit of humor. And we were so happy when we could bring him back over home. But I had to be real careful with him. Mason said, don't let him get ice, don't let him go to school all winter, and just keep him home, and no pickles, no, and Dr. Dunning says, whatever you do, don't give him one drop of carbonation. He said, that's the one thing you can't give him. He said, give him about 8 or 10 glasses of water a day. He says, I don't care if it's just water with a little food color in to get him to take it. He said, anything he will take. I remember Luciola came to see us, and they were awfully good, she and Ursula, whenever there was sickness or death or anything, they always were there with their loving sympathy and caring. And she came and she brought a bunch of colored straws, a package of colored straws for Cray to drink through. She got them in tanglers. And Cray quite liked it. It's hard for a kid to drink about 8 glasses of liquid a day. And so he'd drink different colors. And I told him that we'd put a bottle there. That was his bank, and for every one he drank, I can't remember, I gave him a penny or a nickel or something. I think I started out with nickels, and then I decided that was more than I had change for, that I better go down to a penny, and that he could, every time he drank a glass, he could put a penny in that bottle. And it got quite a lot of money in there, but it helped him, and he finally got better, but he wasn't supposed to exercise harder, just be real quiet. And the doctor says it affects their nerves awful. They'll be real flighty, and just any little thing flares them out. And I noticed that in his schoolwork and things, he's still a little bit like that. And but we were so happy to think we still had Cray. And I thought 2 or 3 times how near I came to losing him, and how the Lord had blessed us to have him. And what a great joy he's been in our lives, and a help to us. Cray's been real helpful to us. He's been so willing, and he never refuses to do anything you ask him. And he's been there when we needed him. And he was, can't say he was a bonus, but if I'd have listened to the doctors, 2 or 3 doctors told me that I should never have any more children. And if I'd had something done that I couldn't, they wanted to tie the tubes and all this. And if I'd have done that, just look what I would have done. I wouldn't have had Cray nor Geff. And I would have missed so much. And I look back at that and I think, oh, what if I made the wrong decision? Not just thank the Lord for being so gracious to give me both of those children. But I could have just passed by that beautiful opportunity without really knowing. But Cray, dear, your mission in life wasn't over. You began to respond right from the time we got you to the hospital. And with both of the doctors working on you faithfully and the nurses being very exacting on giving you your shots and taking your blood pressure and all these things to faithful for several days, and then you being obedient and doing the things you did to get better, even though it took you clear up into high school. They told you couldn't play gym, you couldn't do all these things, you couldn't play basketball and rough it up with the kids, and all these many things. Still, your mission in life wasn't over. And when I think of the wonderful things that have come into your life since then, I think of your wonderful family, sweet and dear Brenda, and your three wonderful children, healthy, talented, and happy children, Jessica, Lane, and Tim. They're all witnesses to the blessings of the Lord. And when I think about your schooling, your honors that you got as a student, your school activities, your mission, and your temple marriage, and all these blessings and the things that you've done since then, about your music, and what a joy it's been in your life. And all these things, I know that I must tell you to be grateful for your life and for the blessings that have come to you. And give thanks to the Lord. And I just appreciate and bless Aunt May. Bless her heart. She was so willing and so trusty to get us there safe and sound in the nick of time. I'm just grateful to her. And I've told her lots of times. We talked over the trauma that we had getting you there. Well, you had to have bed rest all that winter, and I had to carry you to the bathroom, see that you got your food and the right kinds, and keep all spices and things like that away from you. And I made you a little single bed here in the front room. I bet you'll remember that, in the living room. And there were just certain foods that you were supposed to eat and certain ones that you weren't. And you were in the second grade, and so I sent to have your books sent up here. I think that Marion Shakespeare was your teacher, and it was down to the basement of the chapel because the schoolhouse was burned. And every evening I'd sit by you and listen to you say your spelling words and your arithmetic and do your little writing. And you was a bright and a capable little boy. And it was just a joy to have you enjoy learning. I didn't force you any. I just let you learn what you wanted to. And at Christmas, I think it was that year that you got this big model car to be put together. And it was so complicated, I guess I should say. It was too hard for you to put together. And you really weren't able to get up. But I think Gary Baum ended up helping you put the parts all together and get it glued and fixed. And it was quite a shame you liked it, and it helped you pass some time. And you ended up both giving it to Shane Roundy, who was really a model by. After that, your activity out of doors was really pretty much restricted. You know, I always seemed no football, no roughing it up. And I was so careful with you. And it was during those times that I helped with your prayers and got real close to you. I felt just so close to you and so tender-hearted towards you. And it just used to kind of break my heart to have Lyle and Dennis be able to play outside together with the basketball and things out by the barn and the yards and things and have you watching from the window. And I worried that when you did go back to school, that maybe you'd be far behind. I knew you'd got the youngest one in your class. And so I took you back down to school when you could go, and I asked Marion Shakespeare. I told her I'd try to keep Geff on your lessons, but I didn't know how you were doing, and I checked with her again, and when I checked with her, she said, oh, don't worry about Cray. He's far ahead of the other kids. She said, if all my kids were in the class, wouldn't they more worried than Cray, because over their school, she said, he's ahead of the class. He's leading in all of the things. That pleased both you and me. And I thought maybe I wasn't such a bad nurse and teacher after all, because all through the years you were able to hold your own in school. In fact, you led, and it was you that gave the valedictorian address when you graduated from high school. But the bad part of that was that I had to write you talk. It turned out that I had to write you talk. I tried to get you to sit down with me and help me get it done for you, but you wouldn't do it. You said, oh, you do it, Mother, and you don't worry about it. And